off by looking. Hi. So, here we go. We're talking about great digital design. Look how fast that switched, that's amazing. Great digital design is our conversation today. And, we're having a little bit of trouble in blockchain with great digital design, and that's what I'm here to talk about. Great digital design is kind of a done deal. We know how to do it. It equals, and the way to do it is to study behavior, define a problem, need, or desire by studying behavior, and then designing a solution. And this has actually been a long-standing way of designing any product, whether it's digital or not digital, and it certainly is the best way to design anything. Unfortunately, in blockchain companies, we are spending some time designing a solution first, and then trying to make it fit. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Right. So we come up with a great idea, and then we think, okay, this idea is really going to go. I'm just going to build a thing, and we put it out there, and nobody buys it or nobody uses it. It's a very, very common thing to happen in blockchain companies. I'm going to tell you in this conversation why that's happening, why we've been taught to do it that way, and then I'm going to spend some time on how to do it right. And I'll try to make it fun as we go along. We did a design survey of 109 blockchain companies. It was super fun. We were originally shooting for 200. We got a hold of 109. And Will's going to fix that. Thank God for Will back there.
Yeah.
So how many practice great digital design? How many blockchain companies practice great digital design? This is working on design from day one, right? So as soon as you get an idea, you start being intentional about design. Being intentional about design is a really big deal. Study behavior, define the problem, and design the solution. That is the methodology to great design. 5 companies, 5 blockchain companies out of 109 surveyed, and most of those were actually talked to. That is a really horrible, horrible number. We can do a lot better. That's only 4.58%, right? That's pretty easy math. Those 5, people always ask me who those 5 are. You're going to recognize all these names because they are intentional about design. And because they were intentional about design, they are actually the largest blockchain companies around. Ripple, Circle, IBM, Coinbase, and MasterCard. Which is kind of funny. It's kind of a surprise to us that MasterCard is doing so well with the blockchain. This is holding us back. This idea of thinking of something and throwing it out there is holding us back. And so that's what this talk is about, is trying to fix that. Poor design limits markets. It also limits your growth as a company. And so we're going to get into some of that stuff. I'm Brian. My name is Brian Baker. I'm a digital design expert. I've been designing digital properties since 1994, which is a really long time. I'm only 51 too, so I started a little early. I have 25 years in software design. I have 19 years of consumer product design. I was a cab driver for 2 years, which is, I think the education when you're a cab driver is pretty extreme, especially when you're driving a cab during the crack epidemic in San Francisco in '92 and '93. And by the way, there's no shield in the cabs in San Francisco, so you're sitting with those people. Very interesting. And I'm a managing partner at Rebel V2. Rebel, the name has been around since 1994. V2 is because we merged with another company a couple of years ago. Oh, this is the slide. This is the requisite logo slide, just to show you people how important I am and how much I've designed in the past. This is that requisite logo slide. So we work with several different kinds of companies. Automotive companies we work with. That looks like consumer electronics companies. Retail and textiles. There's more retail. And media, and finally banks. Been working in banking for a little over 20 years. And this is the digital design, both for the front end and for the back end. My challenge is to show you the value of great design. Now usually when I do that to folks, when I say, here's some stuff that's designed really, really well, not necessarily by me, and how do you illustrate that to people? One way to do that is to show you pictures of a Tesla and an iPhone, an OXO potato masher. Does anybody have the OXO potato masher? Right, this is a great product, and all these products followed along with the design methodology I'm talking about, right? And that's why they were so successful. But instead, we're going to talk about something different. We're going to talk about, oh, this is through pictures. So actually, Will, this is the wrong presentation.
I don't
know where you got that from, but that's funny. This was the very first presentation. So this might not really go as well as planned. How about the one on Friday? You can look for that one.
All right.
And we'll just speed up.
Yep.
But so I usually do this with pictures, like I was saying. So I'm just going to zip through these and go through those. That's a that was an NVIDIA chipset, because I thought I was going to be talking to you know, blockchain people. So that's what you mine with, was that NVIDIA circuit board there, NVIDIA circuit board. But the pictures are good. Pictures are pretty good to tell people, hey, the reason you love your iPhone, the reason you love your Tesla, the reason you love your Ford Escape is because people follow a certain process, right? And that's a really good way to illustrate that. But instead, we can go to, let me get through all of these. These are all products people love. I designed the UI for that thing. It's kind of fun. There's a video game. Pictures don't really work, so show us about, this is that earlier thing. What was the very first human invention? That's how I'm now explaining where great product design comes from. Because the very first human invention is an interesting thing to think about. It's like a thought experiment where we can say, well, everyone says, well, fire was probably the first human invention. That doesn't make a lot of sense because we probably had to have stuff before we figured out fire. Some people say it was the femur of an antelope that mankind picked up out of a carcass somewhere and started banging each other on the head with and then just killing stuff. I like to go a little kinder and gentler way of thinking, probably because I live in Boulder in San Francisco, and I kind of think that we should start 3.3 million years ago when we are defining the first human invention, and we should start with this young lady and her son. This is an Australopithecus ape, which is probably where we came from. And again, this is almost 3.5 million years ago. I've named them for the ease of use of this presentation. Her name is Groot, and because she's an ape and she's not super progressive in her thought, her son's name is Groody. So that's because they just named themselves after grunts, really. But you can see that Groot and Groody are sitting here by a stream, and they have a little bit of a problem. And the problem is that Groody has a cough. Groody is a small ape. He's like a couple months old, and he has a cough. Another problem is that Groot can't leave the cave at night to give Groody some water, right? Because Groot, the mama ape, does not have fangs, claws, armor, or night vision, whereas every other apex predator that's standing by that creek at night does. So she's with her tribe of 15 other apes, and they're in a cave huddled overnight. And Groody is coughing, and she has no way to fix that. Until she wakes up one morning and sees this. And when she sees this, she thinks, well, hey, my footprints yesterday have water in them today. And so my imagination of the first invention of mankind is that she reached down, picked up her own footprints, and dragged it into the cave. So how does this equate to great design? Well, she found a problem that needs water in a cave, right? That was the big problem that she discovered, and she can't leave the cave. Well, the solution then is a vessel of some sort. And so a cup is now becoming the most considered thing as the first invention of all time, because we needed water overnight when we were in the cave. And Groot's way of designing is the same way that we design today. I don't think we'll have this slide. Oh yeah, Groot's methods are your methods. We haven't changed that much. We've just codified this in the last 50 years or so. It's called human-centered design, or UX design if you want, or design thinking, or customer service design, whatever you want to call it, but the methods are exactly the same. Study behavior, define a problem, need, or desire, and design a solution. That's how you build great stuff, right? Success rate of great design is around 80%. When's the last time an iPhone failed? When's the last time a Tesla didn't sell? Has OXO ever introduced a product that doesn't work? I've had 300 clients over the last 19 years in digital and hardware, About 70% of the stuff we design gets built. They've all succeeded in the marketplace. When have you ever heard that before from a startup community? You've never heard that before. 9 out of 10 fail in the startup community because they don't study the customer first, right? Not the blockchain. Blockchain has a problem with this. Remember where we are? 4.58%. That's kind of the success rate of blockchain companies, right around the 5% mark, 1 out of 20, rather than 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10. Why has this happened? Because we've been sold a bunch of snake oil. And snake oil is a very real thing in the blockchain community because most of the companies in blockchain are very young. It's been around for 10 years, right? So we don't go to the trouble, we don't have senior people, senior designers, or we don't have the money to pay them to actually figure out how to build great products in the blockchain. And that's been a real problem. The snake oil is sold by people who want to sell you a lean startup methodology. Can anyone name me 2 companies that have been successful with lean startup? In the history of all the companies you ever know. Come on. No, they didn't do it. 2 companies, right? How many people here have heard of lean startup? All right, everyone, right? How many people have read the book? Everyone again. How many people have known 2 companies have been successful following that methodology? Nobody again. Snake oil. Design sprints. Snake oil. Right? This happens because they're taking a great methodology of design and they're screwing it up. Design is the last thing, is the second half of great design, not the first half. And this is our codified, proven design methodology. They spent 2 months in their basements building an electronics prototype with an Arduino board. They're not engineers. They just figured this thing out. He takes it and he says, have you studied the customer at all? No, we're pretty sure this is going to sell. And he drops it on a concrete floor. Because he said, I'm not building any more shit in China. I'm not going to take 2 years of my time and your time and roughly a couple $1 million and build this until you know who your customer is. That's the most important thing. Street interviews. This is awesome. All the accelerators are having people go out and ask people on the street, do you like my product? I'm a startup. Do you like my product? Well, first of all, we love the entrepreneur in the United States, and people just lie to you on the street. Don't go ask questions. Don't ask your friends or family. If you get a no, I'll give you some money. Because everybody will just say it's great. That's no way to do things. A/B testing. I've seen entire companies built on the 9 customers that they have just by looking at Google Analytics. This is also kind of a dumb idea when you put it in that context. Design sprints, which is and lean startup, they're the same animal. They both just take that second half of good design. And online demographics. Don't let Pew Research do your work for you. The design methodology I'm going to explain today is not that complicated. It's not that big of a deal. You can do it yourself. You can hire somebody to do it, but it should be done. Testing the power of great design. Here's what you need to test the power of great design: a pen and a pad. And I don't know where my notebook went, but I'll find it. I actually took some notes before I came in. Oh, it's over there, isn't it? So I studied, which was kind of fun. This is usually a $1,000 challenge that I have for people. If you do what I'm about to describe, and just spend 1 hour doing it, I'll give you $1,000 if you don't discover something amazing about your customer. How's that for an incentive? It's kind of fun. This is all you need to do, is have that pen and that pad. And I want you to go out and just write down what people do. What people do is their behavior, right? The challenge, here's the challenge: 1 hour, 1 notebook, and a little bit of a mindset. So the mindset you should have when you're doing this test is to have some humility. You don't know the answer. That's the whole idea of the test, is you're trying to figure out the answer by watching people. And you should be curious like a child. But you know how kids are always so curious? Be curious like a child. That's the designer's #1 mindset, is to be curious like a child. Take furious notes on behavior. Furious notes on behavior. And this is arms, fingers, and heads. There are some great stories that we have of just discovering how people feel about software by watching their mouse hand, right? Their right hand using the mouse. We have great stories in physical hardware, obviously. Automotive, we've done great work in automotive just by watching how people drive. We're not talking to the people while they're driving. We're just watching them drive. They'll tell you everything you need to know with no questions. It's really kind of fun. Before I came in here, or actually when I got here this morning, I took notes. This is about 4.5 minutes of notes. I did it again over there. It looks like this. This is how messy good design is. I saw 14 people enter this building. 13 people, 9 men, 4 women. Sport coats, 7 out of 9 men had sport coats, 1 out of 4 women. That's an interesting stat, isn't it? There are, just about everybody enjoyed their experience at the front getting their badge. Nobody had a conflict. I never saw these 14 people, I never saw anybody not get a badge, or not find their badge, right? Usually you see some mess up there, and it didn't happen. I also noticed that nobody knew where to go after they got their badge. So of those 13 people that walked in, 1 of 13 people found the rooms where these conferences are being held. The other 12 walked right by them. And then they looked left or right at the bathrooms in the middle of the hallway there, and they went all the way to the end. Why did that happen? Is that because you could see daylight through the other window way back there? Is it because the signs were next to these doors rather than right in the front? Is it because the person at the table never told us that, hey, your conference is over there and your conference is over there? Very interesting, isn't it? We can actually change the way people run a conference just by watching people enter. I never talk to these folks, but I can vastly improve the experience. How many people went to the Global Blockchain Summit website and figured out that there were 2 rooms? Pretty much everybody? Did anybody have trouble with that? Yeah. I mean, it was kind of funny because all the things were listed and it looked like it was just 2 days of this one room until you realized that consensus was a room. And that's why you went in there and made consensus. That should all be listed at once. Actually, the Boulder Startup Week and Chase has done a great job of illustrating the conference itineraries. And they developed that by themselves, and it has made a huge impact on their attendance at their conferences. So just taking notes. With 5 pages of notes, you start to see patterns. I only watched 13 people walk in, but what if I watched 50? What if I watched everyone? I could start to see patterns. The one pattern I did discover out of 13 was nobody knew where the conference was, right? With 20 pages, you can define their problem, and with 100 pages of notes, you can discover solutions. My friend built some software for laser eye surgery centers a couple of years ago. Some of you may know him, he lives here in town. And it's very interesting because he spent a full month, 6 hours a day, in the waiting rooms of laser eye surgery centers. Can you imagine how boring that is, right? That's a horrible thing to do. I couldn't imagine doing that. He could tell you, when a woman walked into the laser eye surgery center, he could tell you what page she would turn to in Vogue. And for men who were also stereotypical, they always picked up the Auto magazine, and he could tell you what page they went to in the Auto magazine, right? He recorded every time the receptionist got up and went to the back of the clinic and came forward again. And that's how he made his software, by watching that receptionist. I think he saw 2 female receptionists and 2 male receptionists, studied them for a month, and he made software that saved that person a whole lot of time. In fact, they no longer need a receptionist, because a nurse can sit there now, because it doesn't take very long at all. And the nurse can sit there, the doctor's office saves money, and he made patients more comfortable while they're waiting. The term laser eye surgery center is one of the worst marketing terms. Laser eye surgery. Imagine, you're sitting in a waiting room. Has anybody had LASIK done? Were you nervous? I mean, who's not nervous, right? I'm so nervous I can't do it, right? And so but isn't that interesting? How can we make you feel comfortable? If he knows every time you twitch and he sees you doing this with your leg, and then he sees you calm down when somebody just explains, no, it won't hurt. That's what you tell them right when they walk in, right? So the software reminds the receptionist of all those things. I think he built it for 68 grand or 75 grand or something like that, and sold it a couple months later for $500,000, and it's now being licensed all over the world. That's pretty cool. We'll do a personal case study. This is something that I did. Our client was a crypto investment bank, the compliance and trade desk. And why they called us? Because they wanted to reduce mistakes and be SEC compliant. Where my customer, getting to know my customer, is actually the bankers. There were 27 people at this compliance and trade desk, 27 people. And those 27 people were my customers. I had to study them, right? This is what they started with. This is purposely grayed out, of course. But they were starting this with 70 different fields on the first page. This is how they were doing their compliance work when somebody said, I want to trade $3 million or $3 million in Bitcoin for euro, right? Something like that. They'd see this, this was what would come up. This was horrible. It was Google Sheets and Excel, right? And they needed some software. This is just forms and field software. We do this all the time, but there are some very real best practices to it. But even though we know the best practices, and even though we know them like the backs of our hands, we went and studied. So let me tell you about that study. We actually went to the bank, and we went to the 44th floor in Manhattan, and we were introduced on day one to the bankers. This is Brian and his team, Elizabeth and Karen, and they are not going to talk to you today, but they're going to take furious notes behind you all day long. And around 10 a.m., people get comfortable with that. The first 2 hours, they're watching themselves. There's no nose picking or hair twirling. But after that, everybody's super comfortable, and you can really get some great data. The next day, we brought in donuts, and we interviewed them all. So we already knew their work process. We knew everything the software had to do for them, and we discovered several things that the software, that no one even considered that should be in the software, that nobody even considered. We even discovered a couple potential opportunities for fraud while the SEC guy was sitting there, which was awesome because then he noticed too. The results were font, color size, AI, human interaction. So now transactions show up like this. There are about 24 on each page, and when the machine discovered something that didn't seem right, so they had a stupid API from a bigger bank that came in and asked everybody to type their name in. So Ben Johnson typed his name in, and he forgot the N at the end of his name for Ben Johnson, then you would get the red thing, and the compliance officer would have to correct that. Right? All of this kind of stuff. The ROI was we eliminated full position and eliminated all mistakes, and it paid for itself in a couple months, and they were SEC compliant. And this was with 3 days of study on site with the bank. They are now using the software all over the bank. It's a very large organization, and the 3 banks that are coming to them with APIs are now also buying the software. This is a big deal because we were the first ones to do design for compliance software in probably 15 years. Right? Blockchain companies are late to the party, but we can recover. Because what I just told you is very standard UX procedure, very standard human-centered design procedure, and we can all be successful with it. Study these 8 customer behaviors and you'll have it down. You'll have it down. These special 8 customer behaviors that we've noticed in our work in the blockchain are important for us to consider. First one is frustration with the blockchain itself. Study how other people talk about the blockchain. It doesn't matter how you talk about the blockchain within your organization. Your customer doesn't care about that. Your customer might not understand the term blockchain, right? If they don't understand the term blockchain, then your site shows up if you deliver a pop-up. So join our mailing list or get our newsletter.
Interrupted.
Yeah, it's interrupted, right? New design is confusing. We live in an egalitarian time for both software and for web products and for apps. Study common design patterns in your markets. Banks have design patterns. You can look that up on Google, design patterns in whatever your industry is. You'll see those design patterns. You want to maybe improve those a little bit, but you can also stay with those design patterns so you can make a real difference in your market, make a little bit of a splash. No industry talk. Study what language your customer does not know. So if your customer doesn't know the word blockchain, for example, then don't use blockchain. If your customer doesn't understand what ring key is, I just went to a site yesterday, and they had ring key on. Does anybody know what ring key is? It's the test, it's a test for
Ring
interior.
B.
Oh, ring B, yeah, ring B. See, I don't know what it is. So three times on the front page, right up front, we're talking about how they're doing it, and nobody knows what they're doing, right? So understand, and by the way, this is a streetwear company. It's an apparel company, right? Build trust. Study what people need to trust about your product and about your market. So in banking, we have some very specific trust issues going on. And we worked with banks in the early days, in the early 2000s, on how to build that trust, right? Bankers actually moved from wearing sport coats and ties to wearing sport coats and no ties to make them look familial, right? That was a pretty big move for banks. Security, study how people would like their identity and data protected. This is also super important. I would say about half the wallet companies never say that they're secure anywhere at the time of getting the wallet. Come on, people. Security is a big deal to folks, not everybody, but some people, and they want to see that list. And then top of all, barriers to entry. Study what is in people's pockets when they sign up. What I mean by this is if you have a web app or any web product, and you want to get people to sign up, imagine they're in line at the DMV. That's where they are. They don't have their mortgage with them. They don't have their house title with them. They've just got a driver's license usually, right? Imagine they're there. Don't kick them out of the onboarding process just because they don't have all the things. Just save it for them until they get home. And finally, patience. Study when people ask questions and then be there with a patient attitude and response. Any new technology is a little complicated to people. Anyone over 60 in the year 1982 was unable to figure out how to use a VCR. Right? This is part of human behavior. And anything that you're building with a new technology needs to be explained well. And that's the last thing specifically for blockchain companies. Conclusion, blockchain companies are struggling with design. And we need to adopt great design moving forward. I don't think it's that much of a challenge. Study behavior, define problems, and design solutions. That's the way to make great product. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're running a little bit late, about 10 minutes behind, so we have a 5-minute break before the next session. The next session